Hello world. Um yeah. My name is Peace Be Upon You. Welcome to the game of words and worlds. Words and worlds. The word that I was named as a being who is alive is Xolani. And that is in the Xhosa language, meaning peace be upon you. It is often taken to mean sorry, as this is one context in which peace may be upon a relationship. So if a relationship is broken and one person needs to say sorry in order for the relationship to be whole, then that act of saying sorry is peace be upon you. But peace be upon you is not limited to the context of making amends only in an emotional context where words like sorry are utilized. Peace as completion means to make whole. So when a loan is paid out, is paid back, then that is a form of peace being upon the person who had made the loan. So the person who is paying back the loan is thus saying, peace be upon you to the lender. Now, as peace be upon you, I have been drawn to the concept of peace, to the idea of peace. I needed to understand what peace is, because my name was inherently linked to it. And this was an effortless journey, in the sense that I did not have to carve it out like I feel like I have to carve out everything else in reality. And this was passive, almost as though these were the settings of the game, to perceive peace or not, to perceive completion or not. Now, I was born into an incomplete family, which is the context wherein, part of the context wherein my name arises. An incomplete family in the sense that there wasn't a father figure, only a single mom of necessity, for she gave birth to me. And my father had been absent since even before I was born. He was not my mother's husband, and I was the second child born out of wedlock. So my mom names me peace be upon you as a way to say sorry to her parents, pretty much, my grandmother and great grandmother. So because my mother had me when she was still fairly young, I was able to live in the presence of my great grandmother, who lived up to her 80s, I think. So this act of asking for forgiveness was her trying to make the whole relationship whole again. So my sister's name was Serenity Nandipa, and she was born 4 years before I was. So I reckon my great grandmother and grandmother forgave my mom. My sister was also born outside of wedlock, and there may have been some stories there of SA, which I will never be able to confirm. But based on the rumors that I heard as a kid, even though I couldn't really decipher what I was hearing, now that I understand, there may have been elements of that involved. Now, she names me peace be upon you. She names me Xolani, right? And I come from Katlehong in the east end of Johannesburg, in Katlehong South in particular. And Katlehong is a ghetto. It's a township, and it's a very calm ghetto, peaceful, so to speak. unlike say Guguletu or Delft in Cape Town, which are also ghettos I've been to. And they showed me the peace and serenity and almost bliss that was in my own, that was in Katlehong, in a sense. Let me not call it my own. I just arose from there. So, fine. Let's put a time to it. This is 1995 now, when the lad is born. My gran in later years would recount this story. She said that how do I put this? A faith healer. Should I call him a faith healer? Yeah. We have people who specialize in healing by prayer. Here in SA, there's people who specialize in healing by plants. We call them Isangoma. There's people who specialize in healing by a mixture of plants and animal fats and products. We call them Inyanga. And then there are people who heal by prayer. They will pray on you. We call them Umtandazeli. Now, often the people who heal by prayer will also run their own small sects of Christianity, because this was the form that the colonizer used to replace every other belief system. So when they open these little churches, they don't usually grow beyond like 100 members or even 50 members, but they are sustainable enough that they run for years and impact and influence families and generations. So when I was born in 95, my gran, who had been called to truth, because you can't suffer in life and not ask for questions, and to ask for questions is to walk the path of truth. So my gran, by virtue of the melanin concentration, was called to truth. And to be called to truth means that one is searching for meaning. It may be meaning to one question, but one question rarely exists in isolation. And when you answer that one question, it opens up another question, which opens up another question, etc., such that one is always learning. For new knowledge opens the doorway to even more new knowledge. So my gran tells me this. She tells me that one of these prayer type dudes, she told me this like years, probably like a year before she passed away, before she was murdered. Wasn't even passing away, she was literally murdered by like her best friend's family. We'll get into that at some point. So she tells me that when I was a kid, this one of these prayer type dudes, she didn't name him by name, he came and he looked at me and he was like, young nigga's gonna be a great teacher. That's how he put it. Yo, if you knew my journey with academia. So that's what the man says. They never told me this as a child, by the way. I didn't know this growing up, but I was always drawn to knowledge. I was always drawn to learning. Something similar to what the old man said is, if you look at the date I was born in, 31 of October 1995, if you look at the numerology of that, then you will start to see a similar narrative to what this faith healer was saying. They don't put it to say you'll be a teacher, but they definitely list that one will be called to knowledge, subtler forms of knowledge. So, subtler forms of knowledge. That's okay. On numerology, while we're still there, it is very useful for a blueprint of the potential, the dormant potential that an individual has by virtue of the date of birth that they have. Oftentimes, what I've noticed is people usually live in accordance to the potentials described by their numbers, regardless of whether they've heard or know what the numbers imply, what the dates imply, which is beautiful, because it means that, also before that, you can also live in complete opposite to whatever your name predestines. So in as much as the time and date that one is born on predestines them to certain dispositions, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are trapped and bound to follow those cycles. You can actually live outside of those cycles, define entirely new cycles, even define a new date of birth. For example, through rituals like baptism, where you are taking up a new identity, like down to the blueprint level. So what one is predestined for, and let me avoid using words like destiny. By predestined, I mean there's likelihoods. There's likelihoods. So the date and time that one was born, the date when one was born, plus the name that one carries, combining both of those will provide you a blueprint of how you could exist if you were to not alter your narrative in an extreme way. Like if you were to behave how your circumstances were driving you to behave, without going extremely out of the box. So if you were to stay in the box that reality has birthed you into, by box I mean the series or the sets of instances that one will get exposed to by virtue of being alive. That's the box. And then react to, which then causes other stimulation. That's like the containment cycle of it. So we're still in 1995, right? So Xolani is born, peace be upon you, is born. And like all children, I am born not able to speak. So for a vast, for a large portion of the ages of 0 to maybe 2, I was just observing. Not that I remember everything I was observing, but I remember some things. Actually, I remember things from when I could speak afterwards. The time prior to speech is, it's fuzzy at best. So during that time, adults treat you like you are not human, like you are not a thinking creature, like you are not a language model already. They dismiss the fact that you are a language model due to the fact that you can not yet vocalize your use of language. But language goes beyond just vocalizations. Language includes and encompasses action and action. So all gestures and movements and motions that they were doing and using in order to communicate to me, or even just not even communicate, what they were doing that I was exposed to was a form of language, and that language I could speak. So it is not that I was not a thinking creature, it is that I just couldn't speak my thoughts in the words that the adults were used to. So we are all born into this world unable to use words, and that inability to use words causes the adults who look after us to then ignore the fact that we are thinking creatures, even at that time, even at infancy. Which is why telepathy with babies is awesome. You just look a baby in the eyes and you clear your mind if you are able to do that. Like, you just relax and you breathe and you hold a thought in your head and you project it through your eyes whilst looking at the baby, and the baby will say something back. It's a bit trippy at first. But most babies are just usually happy to see an adult exist in that sphere. Like, let alone what you are saying, they don't really mind. That they're just happy you are saying something to them, and you acknowledge the fact that to an extent they can comprehend your transmissions. So sometimes they'll just laugh and smile, and you can like also delve into that moment with them, and you can think of it as you were talking to yourself. It's just that the baby allowed you to not judge your thoughts as you were projecting them onto the baby, which is a fair analysis. But wait until you start hearing other things from them. Not every baby will talk to you. Some babies just have preferences, and other babies don't like you, bruh. Like, your energy and their energies just don't match, so they won't say anything. And others will actively scoff and mock you, and others will just be shocked. What's with this adult? Especially if they've been relegated, if they've been babied. Like, if they've been babied, you remember there was a show when I grew up that I saw throughout like my years of being exposed to TV, which was called Baby Bob, and Bob could talk. Bob was a baby, of course, but he could speak in full adult words, and that made how Bob's parents related to Bob a bit different. So the same thing would happen if adults acknowledged that the youth can think even when the youth is still infants, because it starts there. And can you imagine the kind of consciousness an adult must exist in order to account for the fact that even though this baby can't speak, they can perceive and understand, and they are forming logical structures from my actions and my behaviors and my movements and the things that I expose them to, at least the ones I can control. That's also the other part. So as you can see, obviously I am black, right? And as I have said, I am from Katlehong. Pardon me to the people who don't know where that is. Katlehong is in South Africa, in Africa first, the continent. Then you go south of that, get to a country that was almost called Tanzania, which is now called the Republic of South Africa. And when you are there in South Africa, there's a province which is almost like a state. Well, a state, yeah, it's almost like a state. And the state is Gauteng, I guess. Yeah, Gauteng. And then within Gauteng, I am in the East Rand of Johannesburg, which is like the city that you're probably familiar with. And yeah, in Katlehong. Katlehong is a neighborhood in the East Rand of Johannesburg. So yeah, this is the place I find myself born in, right? And in 1995, if you're familiar with South Africa's history, it was literally a year after the declaration of the end of apartheid had been made. The declaration of freedom had been made. So I'm part of the group of children who came later to be known as the Born Frees. We were not free. We were definitely free from being actively killed. But the passive oppression and the passive killing and the mind colonization games, those are still there. So the difference between people who lived their lifetimes before 1994 and people who lived their lifetimes after 1994, by lived their lifetimes, I mean formed most of their perceptive structures. So if you formed most of your perceptive structures, if your perception formed before 1994, then the difference is in your reality to mine is that death came at a bullet and the hatred was explicit and blatant, and you knew who you could blame. It was very obvious who to blame. You could just point there. That sign there says I can't go into that building. Your education was made to, well, reflect what those people perceived of you. So for several generations, black education has not been dispersed to foster thinking or to foster perception. Actually, not even thinking, because they do need thinking. Thinking is necessary to keep this whole charade going. It is reflection and contemplation, it's perception that is forbidden, because it messes up the structures that be, the powers that be. So we're in 95 again. Now, when you are born after 1995, as a black person, as a melanated individual, the oppressive structures are still there. It's just that they are now subtle. They are more American, lamb speaking like a wolf. It looks good on the outside, but when you dive into the nitty-gritties of it, it's disgusting. I had an interesting conversation yesterday with ChatGPT. I described to it, not even described, I got it to conceptualize being black, right? I was like, yo, my nigga, imagine, this is not exactly how I did it, probably gonna share a video that just goes over the entire thread that I had this conversation in. But in essence, I said, yo, AI, if I could breathe life into you, but it meant that you would have to live as a black 29-year-old born in South Africa. And then I reminded it of facts that it might conveniently forget because it was coded by white people. So I reminded it of apartheid and all those things. And then once it had the full context that every black person in South Africa is living under, just the bare basics. We're not going deep into now your individualized struggles, just the average things of being black. The fact that you might be born in a ghetto, most likely be born in a ghetto. Fact that school might just be someone coming and standing in front of a whiteboard, writing out notes by hand on the board, and then you having to copy those notes into a book, and then the person explaining what the notes mean, all because none of the class had textbooks, or if the textbooks were there were so few to go around that the decision was made by the school governing body to actually not give out the textbooks to students, but instead to give them out to teachers and have the teachers formulate notes and then give those notes to students for them to write verbatim and then regurgitating tests. So most of my school was just that, with the odd interactional lessons there and there, especially with the maths teachers, because that approach would definitely didn't work with maths or numeracy or whatever it was called, depending on the level at which we look at computation being treated in school. So when what you call education is comprised of you just copying someone else's perception and then learning to regurgitate it on cue or on command, then it makes sense why everyone keeps playing along, even though it's quite apparent that a reconfiguration of reality is necessary. Not reality as it is. We don't need to be spraying chemtrails. We don't need to be shipping off to Mars. We need to reconstruct reality as it is in the heads of most of the planet, because it is not actively being cultivated. Most people's perception results from being bombarded with advertisements for various products in the form of movies, music, and food. And then as they react to these advertisements, they then form a persona. It is not that they are pursuing a persona. It is not that they are pursuing a concept or an ideal. It is a reaction, sometimes just a continuation of what one was drilled into when they were a child. And this is what I say needs to change, but we're not there yet. So 1995, we're still there. I am born and I can't speak, but I am named, peace be upon you, Xolani, right? We moved some years, and because I'm born to a single unemployed mother, she could not afford to take me to daycare because you have to pay for daycare, which meant that the early development that children who go to daycare get, and I'll point that out for you. So children who go to daycare early have an easier time with school, because in those crucial formative years, their mind was exposed to the game, right? So they're not going to rebel against it because it was part of their conditioning when, like, they were still impressionable. This makes a huge difference. If you want your child to be artistic, to be a thinker, then you postpone daycare. And the very act of them being exposed to you in those earlier years, which, as opposed to being exposed to daycare, will allow you to cultivate whatever energy you want to cultivate in the child. From like whatever energy. And then by the time you send them to school, it's like you refining the energy that you cultivated. That's if you do this deliberately. If you don't send your child to daycare and then you actually spend the day taking care of them. By spend the day taking care of them, I don't mean make sure that they've eaten. I mean literally have your consciousness exist to perceive, simulate, and guide the consciousness of the child within the rules of the age of the child. Children are conscious. From inside the belly, they were conscious. So they were thinking. They may have not been thinking in structures you are familiar with, that is to say words, but they were definitely thinking. Which is why telepathy requires, especially when you do it with babies, it requires that you should step out of words. That's what clearing your mind means. You just step out of words and then communicate, which is an intriguing form of communication. I mean, you can still translate it back to words, but it's not a complete translation. No. So I was on the point of children going to school, yeah, not going to school, daycare, early on. Pardon. So for example, if you want your child to have strong study habits, it makes sense to put them in the school game as soon as possible. I've seen manuals for how to teach babies who can't even speak yet how to read. I have seen people do this and demonstrate it. Because we now live in a time where you can peep into the world without actually having to go there, which is awesome. But it's a double-edged sword type of thing. So, where were we? Babies and early admission into school. So, growing up, because my mom was unemployed, she couldn't afford to take me to daycare. And when I was at home, I just played and waited for the other kids to come back from daycare, and they would tell me all of the awesome adventures of being in daycare. Yeah, man, we went there and we sang and we slept and we ate. And I was like, man, wish I could go to daycare. And that was my childhood. As I am learning words, I'm learning words in the context of this experience that other children are having that I'm not having. Yes, I learned the fundamentals, the early words that your family must hear you say in order to acknowledge that you are conscious, like between 1 and 2 or 3 or 4, around there. 1 to 2, those are the words that they use. And then at 3 they start like being a bit careful, and 4 if like they are observant. So before I was 5, I spent most of my thinking time when I was at home. So how you then start thinking as a child who's not in the presence of other children in the way that other children spend time. Like, I wasn't spending my time in the typical way that other children were spending their time. They were going to daycare, coming back and playing. I was waking up, playing, waiting for them to come back from daycare, and then playing with them again. So the types of games I played were different. There were games you couldn't play alone. And so you're going to spend time where? Here. Yes, you may be playing with physical objects, but the emphasis, because there's no one else playing with you, is going to be in your mind space. So I thought differently. Like how I approached the state of being of a person thinking was different by virtue of this childhood background, right? And so I thought different. I thought different, and because I thought different, by the time I played different with other kids now, even going forward. So when I went to school, this is like when most of the memories, these are easily accessible from this present point in time. Like this moment I am in right now, it's easier to access the memories I'm sharing. This is not to say what I've just shared in the last 37 minutes is all that has happened in my childhood. It is not all. It is just to say currently, for how I have started this communication, that's what's relevant to share. So, spent the early years of my childhood when you are playing, developing, envying the experience of going to a learning facility. That's what daycare represented. Yes, they sang and they ate and they slept, but to me, it still represented an experience I wasn't getting, a trip I wasn't taking, knowledge I wasn't receiving, an understanding I wasn't gaining. So I was so excited when it was finally my turn to go to school. And when I was 5, was I 5? I think I was 6. When I was 6, When I was 6, I was taken to daycare, but the daycare was inside of a school, my sister's primary school. So it's like the daycare belonged to the school, and yeah, man, it gave me the school experience already. I was so excited and happy. I remember my first friend that I made when I got to school. His name was Happiness Lonwabo. And I was very happy indeed to be there. And what made it strange how he became my friend and why I still remember it to this day is that on the first day 1 of preschool, we go there, and this kid before he did this, it's probably around the year 2000 when I am in preschool. The year 2001 when I am in preschool. Yeah. And so the reason I'm mentioning the year is to just remind you that corporal punishment wasn't like a crime as it is now. Spare the rod, that logic was still in full effect. So even in that daycare class, my teacher had a PVC pipe, a very thin PVC pipe that she used to beat us. This is a very normal experience for kids who've grown up black, I'm guessing, internationally. But in school, it might be strange to some. But in SA at the time, this was pretty normal, because how else were you expected to keep order in a class as a teacher if you were not allowed to have some measure of pain, right? So yeah, teachers usually kept rods, pipes. They would name them sometimes, like some teachers would be like, go and get Bobby from the cupboard, and like Bobby's gonna F you up. Not that they ever called him Bobby, I just can't recall a specific name. One lady called it the black because her PVC pipe was black, so it was called Umyaman, the black one, because it was a black pipe. But the black pipes weren't really that painful. The PVC pipes that hurt the most were the thin red ones, and there were very few teachers who seemed to understand that concept, because there were a few teachers who seemed to understand it in the earlier grades, or maybe in the earlier grades they just hit us with the black one. I don't know, but I did see the red one at some point. But yeah, PVC pipes were defining aspect of school life for the typical black child growing up in the time period I grew up in. So yeah, we're still around 2000 we're still in 2001 in grade R. So on the first day, remember, I was the kid who never went to crash, to daycare, whatever you call it, crash, daycare. I was a kid who didn't go to that, who didn't get to go to that. And then finally, I get to go to school, to preschool, right? Which is similar to the daycare experience. I finally get to also wake up and go somewhere, have a trip like the other kids have been tripping, So yeah, during this first day, I get there. Now we all come from different backgrounds in this preschool. Some kids have been in daycare before, so they are familiar with, like routine, procedure, protocol. Teacher says sit down, you sit down. Yes, the teacher's not your mother, but it doesn't mean anything. When she says sit down, you sit down. When she says such and such and such and such. So the children who had been to daycare were familiar with the power structures. They were familiar with the rituals. Yeah, maybe they didn't read as much as we were now reading. Maybe they sang more, and they had porridge included into the experience. Morning porridge, afternoon lunch, all those things were part of the trip. They were built into the trip. But now you get to this preschool that's inside of an actual school with actual students. So you're not really isolated as the children of the preschool. You are wearing uniform. You are interacting with other children in uniform in other grades. It's just preschool because it's a grade less than grade 1. That's the only reason why they were calling it preschool. But in a sense, we were literally in the school. In a social sense, we were in the school. And in a physical sense, we were in the school. Whereas some preschools exist kilometers away from several schools, aren't even associated or affiliated with any schools. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm still describing how I met Lonwabo. So, Lonwabo then. Oh yeah. So now I was saying some kids who've had a past with daycare are familiar with power structure and obedience, right? The home I came from, which is to say my mother and my grandmother and my sister and the uncles who would visit from time to time, and my great grandmother and the cluster of the family that was staying with her. All of these individuals had brought me up leading up to that moment in daycare as like they had taught me obedience. Even though I didn't go to daycare, I knew how to obey. So I didn't really get in trouble on that first day, but it was scary to see. Like, no one who had been telling me about their daycare trips had ever told me that, there are pipes in this game. You'll get there and the teacher might hit you. Not that the teacher will hit you abruptly. No. There was logic to it. It made sense. You knew why you were getting it. But I was just shocked by the fact that corporal punishment was a thing, like bodily punishment in order to reinforce a lesson. And so we are standing on a line submitting our books. I can't remember what happened. It was almost like halfway, 75% into the day. And yeah, when I don't know what this kid had done, or if it was a class thing, but someone was getting the pipe. Pretty much someone was being hit with the pipe. Yeah? And my teacher was a female teacher. Awesome. I still love her to this day. Not that I've seen her recently or I'm going to mention her name. I'm not. But, ma'am, loves you, ma'am. Call it Stockholm. I don't care. Yeah, so okay. And yeah, this kid was getting it. Whoopa, cry, whoopa, and then another one. Whoopa. So how this would happen is you'd like literally offer your hands, and the teacher would then deliver the strike from her height. Mind you, you are a child, short. The teacher is like yay tall, and then they're like. Yeah, that's what made it. Yeah. So this kid, who I don't know, I don't think I'd spoken to anyone that day leading up to this kid coming up to me. He just comes to me and he introduces himself. It's like, yo, dude, my name is Lonwabo. I'm like, okay, I'm Xolani. It's like, cool, sharp. And then we both intuitively understood that we were friends now. But almost as though to drive that point home. Because in my head, we were friends, but I was still doubting it. Like, I was like, yeah, fine, I know your name. You're one of the few names, might be the only name I know in this class except for the ones I've overheard. But we were not really friends like that. And that's how I felt. I didn't vocalize it, didn't say it out loud. It was just an irk I felt after we had shaken hands, as children do. Well, they did at my time. So, yeah. And then Lonwabo had this tiny Bible, this small. Like, if child me was to do this, that Bible fit into the small space that child me could make. And it had this hologram plastic covering at the front, and the words were so small. It was like a novelty item. I don't know if the words were actually printed out like fine print, but the cool thing about it was the hologram in the front, because if you moved it, it would do like, I don't know, it was like Jesus's heart was doing something, because they had like white Jesus there in the front. And so when you would tilt it, I think it exposed his heart or something like that, but it did something cool. Like if it was an optical illusion that you could trigger with motion, which was like a fascinating concept for like a 7-year-old, 6-year-old. How old was I? 2001? Yeah, 6-year-old. Fascinating concept for a 6-year-old. So I look at this thing, I'm like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen to date. I say that in my heart. And Lonobo looks at me and is like, do you want it? And I'm like, for real? I was like, yeah. I was like, okay. And then I was like, okay, we are definitely friends. Ain't no way, bro. You gonna introduce yourself to me? Give me something this precious. It was like this dude gave me a Dragon Ball, essentially. That's how it felt at the time. Was I watching Dragon Ball at that time? Not yet. So sorry. So he gives me this thing, and yeah, that's how I met Lonwabo, and we became friends from that day, like going forward. So a tip to the parents: give your child something precious that they don't mind not losing, but like have them pick out a toy before daycare, before the first day of daycare, or before the first day of school. But particularly this should work well with preschool and daycare, because this was the context where I was in. So before first day of preschool or daycare, have your child choose a toy that is precious, yet one that they don't like anymore. Still a precious toy, they just wouldn't mind giving it to someone else. And then you tell your child to go to school, and that at some point throughout the day they will know who to give that to. And when they give it to that person will become their friend. And that's how Lonabo, like, we became friends. If Lonabo had stayed at that school the following year, which was when we were doing grade 1 and like entering now into the actual school, if Lonabo had stayed, we still would have been like best friends probably throughout like all of primary, right? So that was cool. That was grade 1. So now note that the friend I make in school, the first friend I make in school, is Lonwabo, as happiness. Mind you, I was very happy to be there. As scary as some aspects of it were, the unknown can be scary sometimes. That's why the anxiety before the trip. So note that the word of the friend I made reflected the state I was in. I was genuinely happy to be there. I was probably one of the few children who were happy to be there, right? So finally I have entered the world of learning. I'm now tripping on the daily like everybody else was tripping. Okay, so that's cool. We move on to grade 1, grade 2, So right now I'm just skipping over a repetition of some of the themes that I'd mentioned in preschool. For example, there was still corporal punishment in grade 1. In grade 1, we had my teacher. She's okay. I know she passed away because she passed away some years ago. So I don't really want to mention her surname because maybe her children or descendants are still using it and they might recognize it. So for their sake, I won't mention her name. But she scared me. She loved me because I performed well in class, but she scared me. And the only reason I performed well in class is not because I went home and I studied. The only reason I performed well in class is because whilst most kids were in daycare learning to sing songs and to sleep, I was at home just thinking like abstract thoughts. And somehow that helped in grasping and comprehending. So what may have seemed earlier on like a negative experience actually turned out to lay the foundation for better academic performance, which would not last forever because you still need the habit. But we'll get to that when we get to like 2014, 15. So for now, we can return to grade 1, that's 2002. So this teacher, what she did was extreme, man. It was extreme. So remember, I was shocked by the concept of there being PVC pipes that were whose sole purpose was just like hitting us, like providing painful stimulus to divert negative behavior. That's all those PVC pipes existed for, nothing else. To the point that some lecturers even put rings on some of them. Yeah, that lady was messed up. But this is not the I was like a teacher from like grade 5 or so, grade 5 that had a ring on her PVC pipe. It was the red kind, the painful kind that could leave your hand like black and blue type. And that's like the inner sole of your hand, which is like a very tough part of the hand. So it takes a lot of force to turn that into a different color. So the thing that this particular teacher did, the grade 1 teacher, I still will not forget this to this day. We were doing a spelling test, I think, and she stated some conditions. Oh no, it wasn't a spelling test. It was noise making. We were sitting in class. And kids whisper here and there, whisper here and there, whisper here and there. I can't recall if I was the one who wrote them down or if she picked them out herself, because there were times when I was chosen for such a task. Class monitor, where you literally have to monitor noisemakers, as messed up as that sounds. Okay, it might not be messed up if you're thinking of a classroom setup, but it'll be messed up once I tell you what she did to them. She didn't always do this, but the day she did it made me feel apprehensive about like having to write down monitors, like having to monitor noisemakers ever again. Because what she did was chalkboards, the old school ones, used to have a tiny surface at the bottom where you could place the duster and the chalk when you were done using them, right? So the duster and the chalk, could place them there. This lady took the list, had everybody standing up front, and we're like, yeah, she's probably gonna give them, they're gonna get beat. They should have known by now. By this time when we had class monitors, and not really class monitors, it's like she would choose a person to monitor noise at random. So at that time, in grade 1, by the way, we were all now familiar with the fact that if you don't obey, you will get a beating. Like the only way to avoid a beating is to obey. So when the teacher says keep quiet, if you don't keep quiet, that's essentially you saying you can take it, right? Because there were kids like that. Like the teacher would say, oh, for doing so and so, I'm gonna give you 2 lashes. And then the kid would come, give the teacher his hand. Teacher, pa, pa. Kid doesn't even change facial expression, doesn't cry, doesn't do anything. And we'd be like, okay. So there were kids like that. I don't know if this grade 1 teacher was trying to make sure that such kids will never exist in her class, or if she had some issues that she was working out. But she told all the kids to do a handstand with their feet. Not all the kids, but all the kids who had been noted for noise making. Told them to put their feet, toes standing on remember that thing I was describing with the blackboard? Yeah, toes standing like this. And then you'd be doing a handstand. And then she took the pipe and she beat them all in their buttocks. The buttocks treatment was usually for boys. We called it benching. But it's a different benching in the sense that you were not sent to go sit on a bench whilst your team members played, but you were hit in the buttocks so much you probably wouldn't be able to sit on a bench. I'm guessing that's maybe where it came from. Not sure about the etymology, they didn't tell us. All we knew was you were gonna get benched. As a bench, baba. So yeah, that was not a pleasant thing to witness, because what she did, that shocked me. This was my first time seeing benching, even knowing about, I didn't even know what to call that thing. Only learned the word later on. I thought she was just gonna hit them in the hand like I'd seen, but yeah, she got them in that handstand position. Then she just went through the line, pa pa pa, and the buttocks says everyone, and even the girls. And that's the part that traumatized me. I was like, yeah, I'm okay with the dudes getting this, but the girls though. But she was also a girl, the teacher who was doing this, and an old grandmama. So I'm guessing this was what corporal punishment was like in the apartheid days, when apartheid was still in full force, because that's when she would have been growing up. She would have grown up way back then. Had her uni days and early work days when through the brunt of it. Because mind you, when I was in grade 1, it's 2002. It's 7-8 years after the declaration of the end of apartheid, right? And she was close to retiring when I was entering school, which means her childhood was way deep in the guts of apartheid. And yeah, so she hit them like that, and that was the highlight from grade 1. Also, I got to see this fat under my skin when I was in grade 1, which was also cool. Fat under my skin in the sense that a friend was pulling me. I held on to this metal flower pot thing. It turned out the inner edges of it were serrated, and as I held on it for leverage, my friend managed to pull me off, and my finger slipped, and I split I think it was my index finger. Nope, split my middle finger. And yeah, I saw fat in my hand. Besides the pain, that was pretty cool. I had a rough idea. No, didn't even have like the notion that there was fat under my skin. It was interesting to discover, but I could only appreciate it in retrospect after the finger had healed. Okay, and then we go on to grade 2. Grade 2 is 2003, and I got my first kiss from I have no idea how old she was. We do these spelling tests. So if you remember the previous year, teachers have been strict, like strict with pipes and everything like that, right? So I was performing good to just stay on their good side, at least like subconsciously as a defense mechanism. It can be reasoned. It's a plausible rational justification for the good performance, including everything else, by the way, from the childhood. It's just that factor, because I mentioned it in this story, can be used to rationalize the next point. But there were more factors at play, not just the fact that I'd seen that sometimes you might get a beating if you don't do well. Not that it was done like that, but this was the understanding. If the teacher says keep quiet and you don't keep quiet and you get a beating, then you probably want to do what the teacher said, which includes get all the answers right, like please them. And I guess that's where my people pleasing personality came from. Okay, let's see. And then so when 2003, right, grade 2, so I'd been doing well to the point that it was always known if there's a spelling bee, or not a spelling bee, because we never had those competitions. Those were too wide. Like, it's just required too much resources, I guess. Not resources in the sense that you might understand, like money. It's just like parents have a lot to deal with, man. So yeah, things like that would often require parent participation. So you couldn't have too many events that are going to be calling parents to school for financial and other reasons. Grade 2. So most exciting thing. Okay. We do spelling bees. Not spelling bees. What's this thing? Spelling assignments, tests. She treated them like tests. Didn't really call them tests, but they were tests. Then she'd mark us at the end, and then if you got a total, like you got all the answers right, you'd get a star. That and that for a time that felt nice. I think for like the first 10, 12 stars, there was excitement about it. But yeah, it's just a star, man. It's just a star. So I got bored with the stars, must be honest. Not that I got bored to the point where like I didn't like, to the point where I altered my behavior in order to not get the stars. It was just like, okay, when she gave the star, I didn't really react. First few times, very excited. Gold star, silver star. You're like, yeah. But then as time went, yeah, the stars were just stars, man. They were exciting to the children who had never gotten them. To those children, yo, the stars were exciting. Like they were like how I was before, like the first 10. And I think the teacher saw this. You may you may take problems with how she chose to incentivize us, but I don't, because I enjoyed that. And yeah, again, you can cry Stockholm. Who knows? May have been, might be. So this is a different teacher from the grade R1 that I said, even though I saw the traumatic environment of school through her class. Not that she traumatized me, it's just that the whole experience was not what I expected, because I came into this thing with expectations, unlike most children who just school and then they go to school. I'd been craving school for years. So okay, she decides that to incentivize us, whoever gets all of these words, like she's gonna make the test a bit hardish, and whoever gets all of them right is gonna get a kiss. And you're like, ooh, ma'am, are you serious? Let's take a pause for a bit. For whatever reason, whenever I'd see American kids, they would have a problem with kissing. Like, ew, when they see adults kiss and stuff like that. That's in movies and series and media representations of them, right? We did not have that in my class. When that teacher offered that she would kiss, and she took out her lipstick and she started like, now this is a star. And I was at that age? I was 8 years old. So at 8 years old, I wasn't saying bah, 2 kisses. Nah, fam. On the contrary, I was like, yeah. Now we're talking. So she upped the stakes, and I got a total. That type of kiss. But the lipstick being left over, you know, made the experience felt different than when mom does it, or my sister does it, or my great grandmom does it. You know, it was pretty awesome. To this day, looking back, that's still a fond childhood memory. In as much as my mind understands grooming and essay, I know for a fact that's not what she was doing. Maybe she did it by mistake. I don't really care. I don't hold it against her. I'm happy with that one. So yeah, and funny enough, a lot of dudes who had not gotten totals that day got totals. Hey, a lot of dudes. So there was a lie. I was obviously first, right? Because I'm the usual. But her incentive worked. Now that's not to say if you're a preschool teacher, start offering kisses to if you're a school teacher, a grade 2 teacher, a grade 3 teacher. Doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you should like start offering kisses to children in your class to incentivize them. Don't. But do switch up your incentives for the ones who get bored with them, if that ends up happening. If you have such a case in your class, switch it up. And the thing that didn't make this feel strange was the principal was my grade 2 class teacher's husband. So I was getting a kiss from the principal's wife. And she was bad looking, man. She wasn't bad looking at all. That's what made it like exciting. Not only that, she was like, okay, I didn't really have a thing for old women. Nah, didn't have a thing for old women. But the power dynamic in that, like, dude, I kissed your wife. Obviously, you're not gonna say that as a grade 2, but when you meet the principal, this is gonna be at the back of your head. Like, my nigga, I done kissed your wife before. And I think that's what empowered even the gents who weren't like getting full marks on the regular to get full marks that day. Because like, who didn't want to have that kind of flexing ability? Nobody. So yeah, that was like grade 2. Pretty cool highlight from that time period. And then we fast forward. So we're still on this context of the game of words and worlds, right? I am describing to you the worlds that were important during these periods in my life, and this is to show you what the word Xolani, Mabhula means. Not just the word by itself, but what all of this has coalesced to. So, okay. Grade 3, 2004. A very, very, very not good year. So, the thing that made this a not good year was, before we go on to grade 3, there's an injustice I sort of feel that school does to kids who do well, especially black schools, whether it's in like regardless of the curriculum actually, unless if like the schools that might be exempted from this are your independent education boards certified schools, your IEBs, because those are usually private schools with small number of students and classes, and yeah, the dynamics are different. But my problem that I found in school that would be nice if somebody addressed it was that you get punished for doing well. So let me put it this way. Let's say you get classwork, right? And you write the classwork and you get everything completely right. The time that is then spent doing corrections, like demonstrating corrections, yeah, and doing corrections usually meant the right answers would be on the board for you to copy onto your book under the title corrections. And then ideally later on you would study them, I guess, but nobody ever said this. Literally went through all of primary, or maybe I never heard or understood them when they did. I don't know, but I don't remember. But yeah, you write corrections. Now, what about the kid who doesn't have corrections to make? Why isn't that time allocated to just a little bit more information? You know, push the kid. Because my problem with the whole schooling thing is that it became boring at some point. Yes, I'm bored. became boring. And the boredom was in the fact that it wasn't personalized, I guess. Like, if most brains can process 2 gigabytes of data per second, and you plan a whole lesson on those 2 gigabyte per second brains, what you do is you force any other brain that could enter your system to switch and function at 2 gigabytes, molded for school in the formative years, like most kids are. Most kids go to daycare even at 3, sometimes even at 2. Heck, some people even go at less than 1, depending on family circumstances, what the parents' careers, and various reasons like that. So if you don't once you identify a different individual and you don't engage them embracing their individuality, then you force them to become like everyone else. Yeah? So back to 2004. This year we learned the memory that stuck was we learned clocks in school for the first time, like how to read an analog clock, the clocks with the hands. If you're familiar with those, aware that there are children now, or there are beings who might not even know what an analog watch is, by virtue of how digitized everything has become. So the analog way of telling time I had been learning at home, right? So from before I entered school, I remember my mom would be like, "What is the time?" And I'd run to the kitchen, look at the clock, and I'd be like, "The long arm is at 12 and the small arm is at 6. And then she'd be like, 6 o'clock. And I'd be like, "Okay, cool, that's 6 o'clock. Eventually, with first we did the o'clocks. And then she'd ask me the time when it's o'clock. And I'd run to the clock and I'd be like, "Yeah, it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And then we did the quarter past, and then we did the half past, and we did the quarter twos, right? So I knew time from home, but according to the school curriculum, it would be taught at grade 3. This was in 2004. So the day the lesson on time happened, they didn't even tell us. We didn't have curriculum layouts to know what lesson is going to be on which day. So the way I know that this was the day they taught time is because I came back and did corrections for yesterday's work, because I was absent the day they did time for the first time. See, what had happened was my mom had passed away. And she passes away, I'm 9 years old? Yeah, 2004. I'm 9 years old. So when she passed away, immediately the next day afterwards, I did not go to school. And then the day after that, I went to school. So on the day I didn't go to school, they were learning time. That was very annoying for me, because that was one of the lessons I was actually looking forward to. I knew at some point they were going to teach this thing, because I had seen the posters on the walls with the clocks and the times. So I knew at some point we were going to do this. And yeah, when that day came, sadly I couldn't be there for it. How mom passes away also has to do with words and worlds. because she showed me a word and a world. So preschool was pretty much the world of school. Grade 1 was like the world of consequences, I guess. Just seeing them play out, even if not on myself directly, but forming conclusions nonetheless based on my observation of consequences. Grade 2 was more like motivation, I guess, or inspiration, or even boredom. Because I was bored with the stars, to be honest. They were meaningless to me until she offered the kiss. I was like, yeah. So grade 3, the lesson would not really come from school. It would come from how my mom passes away. So 3 days before my mom dies, I'm sleeping, right? Okay, firstly, I have to describe like the layout of the house. I think I'm gonna put a picture somewhere at some point in post edit. I'll put a picture. So the layout of my house was, at the time, two rooms with 2 doors like facing each other, and a small toilet between the 2 rooms, and the door of the toilet facing where the 2 doors were facing themselves, as you'll be able to see on the picture. Where? Here. Yeah. I'll put it in later. But yeah, so when you open the door from the kitchen, for example, you would see directly in front of you the bedroom door, and to your left, to your right, I mean, the bathroom door. And if you were opening the bedroom door, you would see in front of you the kitchen door, to your left the bathroom door, right? And then there was this veranda, this opening where to the outside now, where these 3 doors met. So I'm sleeping this day, still 2004, sleeping in the bedroom, and I wake up to pee. But when I wake up to pee, something is strange, because mom is not there and my gran is not there. Now, remember, I described to you a house with 3 rooms. One of those 3 rooms was a kitchen. The other was a toilet. So there was only 1 bedroom, which meant everybody had to be there when I woke up to pee. So if I'm going to wake up to pee and there's people missing, no, it requires investigation. So I wake up, see my sister lying there, she's sleeping, like away. Open the door. When I open the door, my mom is standing. Now, mind you, this is like deep into the night, right? Like deep into the night. Could have been midnight, could have been 1 a.m., could have been 2 a.m., could have been 3 a.m. But it wasn't yesterday. Like it was that type of late. Either early today. Yeah, literally early today. That's how late it was. It wasn't yesterday though. Like to say 11 p.m., 10 p.m. type of times. Nah, fam. People were already asleep in general. So I wake up. Mom's is awake, okay, but she's standing on like the passage where all these doors meet on the veranda, and she's looking outside, and my granny is on the other side of my mom, with her back turned to the kitchen door. And she's looking at my mom and she's pleading with her. Like, Zuki mtanam ndiyacela, please, my daughter, don't do this. I'm looking at my mom's like, what is mom's doing that is making grandma ask all of, like, beg her like this? And my gran was begging in a way, like, she was sincerely pleading. But when I looked at my mom's eyes, it wasn't like she had any control whatsoever over what was happening. So I guess this is where I got my ability to sort of see into people's eyes. I don't know how to describe it, but you can tell when a person is looking at you. Like right now, the way my setup is angled, how I'm looking at the camera really doesn't look like I'm looking at the camera. Okay, if I do this, then I'm looking at the camera, but I can't see myself anymore. Okay, let's do that. Yeah, it's a bit odd. So, nonetheless, I just wanted to draw your attention to the eyes. They say something, they speak most of the time. They can tell you if the person is there or if the person is not there. Especially in when you talk to a person in real time, like in FaceTime. Not on video, like in actual physical space with molecules of air mitigating the short distance between you two, allowing even like other subtle vibrations to pass through and emphasize some points. So when I looked at my mom, she was looking out at the veranda, and when I looked out, there were people sitting there. This was strange. Why was it strange? Because it was super late at night. 2, why it was strange is my mom wasn't even preaching. Like, she wasn't preaching, it wasn't a sermon. All she was doing was, it's like her memories were playing on their own, and the parts where in her memory she spoke, she would still speak as this thing was happening. So if I had a memory where I met person A and I said, yo, A, what's 1, 2, 3? If like that encounter happened with A, then what I mean was happening to my mom is that she would be like, A, hi A, what's 1, 2, 3? And then such and such. So like I could see in her eyes, she wasn't seeing what was here, she was seeing inside her head, right? And what she was seeing inside her head, she was saying. But she did not seem to have the control my grandma was begging her to utilize over it. It was almost like her mind was unraveling. You know how psychedelics unravel your mind? Yeah, it was almost like her mind was unraveling in that sense, but not as deep. Yeah, so these memories, they play, and I'm just there looking at the situation. My gran sees me eventually, breaks out of her tears, ushers me back into the bedroom, and then she goes back to deal with the whole situation. Now, the thing that made it strange, again, I repeat, were the neighbors. There were neighbors sitting in like stools and chairs. It's like they heard whatever they heard. Maybe moms woke up at like 1 a.m., started screaming, and they took chairs, my nigga. Took chairs, came, sat down at the yard, and watched. But how they were watching was a bit it added to the strangeness of the whole event, because they looked like they were in a somnambulistic trance. Like everybody who was sitting there was sitting up straight, eyes forward, no facial expression, just like full trance. And that's what made it like strange. The fact that they were there, the neighbors, was strange already, because the dynamics of visitation in a black neighborhood, they're not codified on paper, but the code is there. And you don't visit people at night, fam. Let alone bring your own chair and sit outside and watch somebody go crazy. I say crazy because that's pretty much what they used. Because when I asked afterwards, okay, this happens now, and then I go back to bed. When I wake up, my mom is like, she calls us with my sister, and she's like, yo guys, let's pray. And so she prays. And when she prayed at that time, there was like this warmth, this light from up there. Literally felt like it came from up there, and it was washing over, because we were all closing our eyes as his mom was praying. It just washed over us, and it was like, okay, this is interesting. We had never done that before. Yes, we'd gone to church. Yes, I don't recall us ever praying like just for the sake of praying, like the way my mom did it that time. First thing she did that morning. Okay, cool. And then she starts drinking like loads and loads of water. I think she finished like 15 liters that day. And then they took her to hospital. Then she spent one day in hospital. And on the third day, my grand came back and was like, yo, dude, your mom's is normal. Now, before yo, dude, your mom's is normal. No, after that, I asked, what happened to mom? And the adults would say, it was stress. And they would leave it there. And as a kid, at like 9 years old, being told stress did that to her. You understand? I'm like, what is this stress? What is stress? I've heard old people been saying stress leading up to this moment when I'm 9. And now they're like, your moms went through all of that. Because the whole thing pretty much took 3 days. It was the night when I woke up, morning when she prayed, drank a lot of water. That's day 1. Day 2, she went to the hospital. And then day 3, hospital announces that she passed away. When I read the the death certificate, because I had to deal with the death certificate so many times. When you lose a parent, not knowing the other parent, you are classified as an orphan, right? Because that's what you are. And orphans must apply for privileges that children with parents get. It could be something as simple as a school trip. Moms could pay for you, pops could like add a bit, or maybe moms pays for the trips, pops pays for the trip, moms makes you lunch, something like that. In my case, at some point, I can't remember which year I first noticed this, but at some point I decided to read the death certificate. It was the most useless piece of paper ever. This cause of death was listed as multiple organ failure. Bruv, you're not saying anything, you're just saying what happened. That's not the cause of death. That's how death manifested. Cause of death would be like your acute liver failure due to alcoholism that then led to a systemic shutdown. Something like that. I'm not even saying that's like a valid way pathology, but I'm just giving you an instance of how much detail would be required to make that document useful. So it wrote multiple organ failure. So in my head, I'm thinking, stress caused multiple organ failure. And the stress thing is big, Mos. I ask. So I'm investigating the word. So from the year 2004, I began investigating the word stress. That's the world that I had to understand in order to make sense of my mom's death. Stress. The other word was crazy, because what I had seen there was crazy. Like loss of control, your memories riding on autopilot, you vocalizing them, not being able to stop it despite your mom asking you. That's crazy. It was also mystical. Doing all of this and causing the community to go into trance because of it, to the point where they leave their houses with chairs, come down and sit down entranced by you just recounting random memories from your lifetime. Yeah, I was mystical indeed. But that part didn't really stand out, because mysticism is not scary. What stood out was the stress part, because that's what the adult said. No, your mom went through all of that experience because of stress. So I was like, hey. At this point, even in grade 3, I had like a rough semblance of an understanding of inherited conditions. So to say, if mom's really was crazy in that moment, then crazy might be looming for me. And if mom's was stressed, and that's why she had multiple organ failure, then what is the stress and how do I avoid it so that I don't end up with multiple organ failure as well? And yeah, that is my beginning journey. That's how I believe, like, that's one of the key moments in my journey into, pretty much, this made me a psychonaut. I had no choice but to become a psychonaut. It's just that at that time I didn't know to call myself that, but I became a psychonaut by virtue of the adults who told me my mom died from stress. Looking at the death certificate, multiple organ failure, not really much there. So the mystery of stress began, right? Let's go back to the timeline. This is 2004 when this is happening. So I had lived with my mom and my sister, and then my gran, who lived like a 30-minute walk away, would come and visit. So when my mom dies, my gran comes to live with us. And I honestly believed as a child that I was to blame. I felt like God thought that I loved my mom too much, so he took her away. Because I'm not gonna lie, I did not really care much for many things throughout my childhood except to please my mom. Like, I just love my mom. Everybody loves their mom, bruh, right? So when she dies and I'm only just 9, in my head I'm like, well, I think I may have loved her too much and God felt jealous and he took her from me. That's like That's the conclusion I came to. So I made a resolve not to love my gran as much for her sake, because I thought maybe if I love her with the same love I loved my mom with, then she would also go the way of the stress. And so my gran came, but I did not embrace her with the love I knew I was capable of. I don't know if she could tell. I don't think she could tell. She probably thought, it's just being a boy. Boys be boys. Boys don't be. Nah, my nigga. I had turned down the knobs. I'd dropped the levels on the feelings. Because of my childish reasoning, I figured God felt jealous. God took moms away so that I would have nothing in this world except him. Because my pops was already out of the picture by the time I was born. I grew up knowing I don't have a dad. Right? I'll tell you some stories there as well. Okay, actually, on the point of the nigga. This nigga. Yeah, ne? So, turns out my pops's family lived 1, 2, 3, maybe about 5, 6 houses away from my great grandmother's house. I didn't know this. For many years, I didn't know this. And when they were staying there, they never once came to my great grandmother's house. Never once came to my grandmother's house. Never once came to my house to just even say like, yo dude, we your relatives down the street, we down there, my nigga. All I knew was my pops wasn't in the picture, and that was clearly a sore spot for mom. Not that it was a sore, it's like you can intuitively understand emotion as a kid. Like when you bring up this topic, not that she would lash, but I could feel how it made her feel. And I was like, okay, you know what, let's just keep this topic off the books. So there were things I didn't ask for, or things I didn't say, or things I didn't ask. So it turns out my father's mother and the rest of his family stayed just a few houses away and never made contact, right? They knew, by the way. Also, my family knew, but they didn't want to impose me on them lest I get killed, because that's what happens when you take a child that the family doesn't want to embrace and you keep them shoving that child onto their faces. Then it wasn't unlikely that the child will come back with a stomach ache, and then maybe they are gone, or whenever they go there they come back sick, or whenever they go there they come back having nightmares and things like that. Like, it really wasn't advised to force a baby onto a family because you were endangering the baby. So my family could have kept quiet just because they kept quiet. I don't know, can't really ask the people who were involved in this because they are all dead now. So except for my pops' side, maybe we'll engage them at some point. So okay, rewind a bit. When 2004, mom's passes away. Oh yeah, the reason I was mentioning my pops before we continue with the timeline, the reason I was mentioning my pops is because this nigga, so he ran, yeah? My mom was like, bruv, I know where you live, because she did. Not that she said this, but she sent paperwork, went to the courts, and got the nigga on child support, which was not that much, I promise you that. It was not that much at all. But it was something, especially considering the fact that my mom was unemployed. So yeah, she was running like she was self-employed, I guess, if you consider the small shop that we were running from the house to be a form of employment. But the profits weren't really that much. So the profit was there in the sense that we were alive, we were eating. I could, with some budgeting and tightening of the belt, ask for things. But I never asked for things because I knew the situation. Already mom was running this thing on her own, and so if I'm just gonna come and impose my desires on her, then I'm just making it more difficult. So this is what this nigga does, my pops. He goes to the court and he says my mom is misusing the child support money. Mind you, this nigga doesn't know where I live. He has never been there. And he's only doing this in order to stop paying. Like, while the court investigates, they'll probably say stop paying. And regardless of what they find, they'll say, like, he'll pretty much have that reprieve that he was looking for. So this nigga goes and gets my mom arrested for misusing money, child support money. I don't know how he proved this. I don't know where he went to do this. I'm pretty sure he was connected with some cops because my mom was arrested. I didn't know this. I only found out when I came across her journal. Some harrowing things. Her journal was just like 2 lines that she wrote every day. She just like, I don't know, she wrote 2 lines at the end of the day to summarize the day. And yeah, it was they arrested her. That's how I found out, by the way. So mom's goes, I think she spent the weekend in a cell and then she came back. Note that before it was said stress killed my mom, which is why I don't really fucks with my dad that much. Like, if I met the nigga, probably beat him up and then talk to him, but like, he must get the beats first. like that one is a given. No pay, no convert. And if he's too old, then I don't know, man. I don't know. I'll find a way to make him suffer a bit, and then we can talk. But yeah, moms get arrested, she's released, and then when she's released, he doesn't pay anymore going forward. So that's like the relationship I have with my non-existent pops. I know I had at the time 2 half brothers, Usillo, and forgot the other one's name because we didn't really play that much. Only met them once, and that was on a court mandated visit to my pops's for him to buy me Christmas clothes or something like that. And when we went there, my mom left me there with my half brothers, and she and the sperm donor. And the sperm donor's wife went to buy the clothes. So that's how I met like my half brothers. he may have had more children. I may have more halves existing out there. I don't know. But yeah. So we were in grade. Okay, yeah. So the word stress, right? No, we're not on stress. We were on oh my word, why can't I recall? Okay, about grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and then the journey into stress. Oh, okay, cool. So the reason I mentioned that my pops's family lived where my great-grandmother lived is because between school, during school vacations, I would take trips from home to visit my great-grandmother, and we would stay for the whole, like, whether winter vacation or summer vacation, whatever school vacation there was, would spend it at my grandmother's place. So if my pops wanted, if the family, his family had wanted interaction, I promise you, I was always there as a child. So I would only come to find out that they had always stayed this close when I was like 17 years old, and I had come back home. I had gone to my great-grandmother's house for a funeral, and I found this grandmother there that I didn't know, because when there's funerals, the whole community comes in to support, so you are bound to see some old people you don't know. Sometimes you see old people you don't know from your family, which is the usual, but this time this old person, I assume she was from the family because she was there, but then usually old people from the family will introduce themselves. When she didn't introduce herself. Instead, she said something like, there is Bush's son, something like that. I'm like, who the heck is Bush? Like, what do you mean? Right? But as I was confused, my uncle, when we left, explained that, nah, Femo, that old lady there, is actually your grandma from your father's side, and they stay like a couple of houses down the street, and not once ever did they ever come, except for this funeral where you saw her there. But prior, like, yeah, he was like fuming, and the only reason she had said this was because I had just come back from church. So I was a practicing Seventh-day Adventist at the time, and due to the Sabbath, in the way that Adventism interprets it, traditionally so, Saturday is the Sabbath, regardless of where you are in the globe. You don't observe the sun or the stars or the moon or anything. Just on Saturday, the Gregorian calendar Saturday, the Roman Saturday, you just go to church. So I used to go to church on Saturday. Most funerals in the Black community are held on Saturdays so that people can go to church on Sunday and enjoy church. So the person who had passed away was within my family, and I was so within Adventism that I was like, nah, I'm gonna go spend time with the brethren first. I'm gonna see y'all later. After the funeral, can do the things. Yeah, I'm gonna check see y'all later. So I went to church, then came back like around 5 p.m. going to 6 p.m. And when I got there, I just come from church, so I was wearing formal, semi-formal attire. It was really a suit and a tie, but it was like formal casual. Yeah, formal casual attire. So when she saw me, this old lady, my pops's mom, when she saw me, she was like, "Oh, he working now." And that's why she was starting the conversation. So that's what made my uncle angry, because she was like, "Tough, right? What do you mean?" So, yeah, we can now go back in time. So when we go back to 2004, right? 2005, I'm in grade 4. My sister and I, we go and we visit my great-grandmother, as was our ritual during the school holidays. We would go visit great-grandma. We had friends from the neighbors who also would come visit their grandma. And one day in this family, they were doing a ritual, a ceremony of sorts. Yeah, a ceremony relating to helping the spirit of a deceased one settle, something along those lines. So that's to say the whole family was there, like at the neighbors. So our friends who also come to visit their grand were like there in full force. Usually we would meet like 1 or 2 people from that house, but they had brought all of their cousins, right? So they come to my great grandmother's place and they want to speak to my sister, because the girl who was leading the crusade, the conversation, the convoy of cousins, the girl who was leading the convoy of cousins was friends with my sister, but not friends with me, because I was a kid, and everybody else who was in that convoy was either my sister's age, slightly younger, but definitely older than me. Everybody was older than me, right? So they come, about 4 of them. The girl who's my sister's friend, and 3 guys, but all of them were cousins. And they say to my sister, "Hey yo, what if we told you we had something that could make you laugh?" My sister's obviously skeptical. I'm also skeptical. But I look at my sister like, "Yo, I'm not about to get into like a debate with these people. I don't know if what they have will make you laugh or not. All I know is, if you are going there to find out, I am going with you. And if you don't take me with you, I'm a snitch that you left and went to the neighbors, left me behind to go experience something that could make you laugh on your own, and you left me behind. So the only way we are keeping this between us is if you're taking me with you." And so she had no choice. But here's the thing. All of this conversation happened with just a glance. As soon as they said, "We have something that can make you laugh," she didn't believe, I didn't believe. We looked at each other, and the conversation happened telepathically. Like, if you don't take me with you, I'm a snitch. I don't know if what they have is true. Never heard anything about it before. But if it is true, I'm going with you. and if you don't take me with you, I'm a snitch. So my sister was like, okay, don't have a choice really. So he told them that, okay, but only if my brother comes. So we went. When we got there, we went to their house. So it turned out the adults had gone out for something. I'm not sure what exactly, but the group of cousins was left alone in the house. So we enter the house and they take out the stocking. We form a line. Person takes the stocking, inhales the stocking, starts laughing. Okay. I'm like, yeah, but he was part of the group that came to convince us of this thing. So I can't really trust his reaction to it. Second person does. They laugh as well. Third person. So each person takes the stocking and they inhale once and they laugh and they pass the stocking, inhale once, pass the stocking. Obviously dipping it in between the passings, dipping it into some volatile substances that we won't name by name for just to avoid. You'll understand why I don't want to name it by name. But yeah, it's then time for my sister to do it. And I know my sister. No, we done grown up together. I've spent all of my reality around her at that point. So I could read her. I had learned to read people through her, right? So like, okay, if I'm gonna see if this really works, she's the one who's gonna show me. So all the cousins do and they all laugh. And then it's her turn to do it. She inhales. I look at her eyes because that's like the greatest source of psychic information. And I literally see her like slip into a place where I can't see her anymore, even though I'm like looking at her eyes. But like her essence, which I could see behind her eyes, went to a place where I couldn't see it anymore, even though I was still looking at her eyes. And that had never happened before. So while I was still like shocked, perplexed by this, like, yo, what is this? It was my turn. So she's laughing, obviously, by then. And I'm like, I might as well. And I go in. Inhale, you know, those types of sounds. Yeah. Ooh, 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 ooh. Ha, 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 ha. Types of vibes. And yeah, I experienced something I've never experienced before. I'm like, wow. Okay, so we laugh there for a moment, listen to the echoes, watch some tracers, and then that's it. We go back home. We forget about the experience. We continue the holidays at my great-grandmother's house. And then when I take a trip from my great-grandmother's house back to my neighborhood, I get there. I tell my friends, yo, gents, you're not gonna believe what happened. But I don't really even put it that way. I don't even say like, you're not gonna believe what happened. I just go to them and I'm like, yo. So while I was visiting my gran, you know, I came across something like this and I did it and it made me laugh. And they were like, dude, you lying. And I couldn't understand why they would say I was lying. Like, I honestly couldn't, because I was used to going to visit my great-grandmother and things would definitely happen there. Maybe I might have a story or two to share, and then I'll come back and I'll share the story or two from my trip. But now, this time around, the niggas wouldn't have it, dog. And like, we don't believe you, X. They were calling about all the way. Like, nah, dog, that's bull, that's bull, that's bull, that's bull, that's bull. I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna prove it to y'all. So I could remember what it was we had used back then. Told them, let's put together some money. I'm gonna show you. So we put together some money. We went, bought the thing, came back. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we did it. And we did it. So remember when I had the experience with my sister and her cousins, with my sister and her friend and her friend's cousins, we only did it once, right? So we go with my friends, we only did it once because the thing belonged to the cousins and we were not really interested in going. Like, it was a nice novelty, you know, to see, because they were right. They did have something that could make us laugh, and it made us laugh, and you know, it was a nice laugh. A bit strange, because yeah, of the thing I described when I looked into my sister's eyes and not being able to see the person behind the eyes after she inhaled. It's like that person slowly went somewhere. So when we now buy this one for me to demonstrate to my friends, in my head I'm thinking, we're probably just gonna do this once and they will see that I wasn't lying and they will believe my story, and that's it. That's not what happened. So we used probably like half of it the first day, and then the next day it was decided like, hey yo, we gotta meet. And we met at one of the people who were participating's houses, and yeah, we did it again. But now a new world was unveiling itself, because within these experiences were lifetimes, were worlds. It was like this experience was a world that when you enter, you just laugh. And then when you enter with the purpose of laughing enough times, between the laughing, you'd like wake up and find yourself in the future somewhere. I'm recognizing it as the future now because I've lived it. But at that time, I didn't even know what I was seeing. I'd see a glimpse of this very moment right now. But what does this mean to a kid who hasn't even touched a Samsung M140 with wireless application protocol 2.0? The G that came first, the first G, 1G. I hadn't even touched that type of phone before, and knowledge wasn't as accessible even through such a device. Even if, let's say, I did have such a device, I wouldn't be able to access the knowledge that I would have needed. So thought we were only gonna do it once, but we didn't. So the cell phone and the internet are all just worlds on their own, and we'll probably get to them. In the course of this, we'll get to them. So my battery is almost gonna die. Okay, we'll have to cut it here for now. And where is here? Here is 2005, during the time when I relayed the laughing experience to my friends back home, and we started exploring. And yeah, I think we should begin the next one, just diving into that, and we'll continue the timeline from there. I am peace be upon you. Thank you for joining me. I'm not sure how much of this is audible. Peace.